freedom is merely privilege extended unless enjoyed by one and all.
All we are doing with this bill is allowing two people who love each other to have that love recognised by way of marriage. That is all we are doing.
Hi, and welcome to Rainbow Shelter News. I am your host, Osman the Dark. As usual, I should mention it's, as usual, content warning. It's the news. There's going to be bad stuff. If there is the possibility of something being triggering from anything that would appear in a news article, then you probably shouldn't watch this. Get a friend to watch it and update you on whatever is important. Hi, Jinx Tiamat. Trees, trees, trees indeed. So, we are starting off today. I think. Did I set up the display capture to assume? There we go. You put Fontaine in captions nerd. Or captions nerd. That's funny. Okay, I need to make sure this is above the captions. Sorry, this is a slightly new setup, so doing my best. So, to start off this week, this is the past couple weeks of news because I missed last week. I was taking a break. Let me shrink. No. Let me shrink chat a little bit as well. There we go. So. GOP group apologizes after posting KKK imagery on Facebook. So this is a story from Alabama. Apparently an Alabama GOP group shared KKK imagery on Facebook. Which, I mean, I suppose shouldn't be shocking, given how it's been very common for the GOP to involve KKK members in their group. So it doesn't surprise me, but yeah. So apparently the Lawrence County Republican Party shared a post Sunday night when announcing its new county chairman, Shannon Terry. At first glance, the illustration looked like a typical GOP elephant with an American flag motif. But upon closer examination, users noticed there are KKK hoods hidden in the white spaces between the elephant's legs. Oh God! Okay, I can... It's not super obvious here, but oh, here we go. Yeah, this is the image they shared on Facebook. The GOP. Dear God. The organization removed the following image following online backlash, insisting it was never intended to post KKK imagery. Sure. A Google search picture of a GOP elephant was used, and later found to have hidden images that do not represent the views or beliefs of the Lawrence County Republican Party, Terry said in a statement. The picture was then immediately replaced. As chairman, I take full responsibility for the error. Illustrator Woody Harrington created the image for a Mother Jones article about racism and bigotry within the GOP, within Trump's GOP party. Yeah, once you see it, you can't unsee it. Harrington addressed the incident in Instagram post, saying it was a lesson in copyright karma. So they took it from someone else's imagery to talk about racism in the GOP. Okay, why did it star out YouTube? Okay, I need to look, I started Stream Elements. I need to tweak things, apparently. Supposed to link to my YouTube. Stop swearing, Stream Elements. Yeah, unfortunately, when they Google searched GOP elephant, they never bothered looking close enough at the original source material or the elephant's legs to notice the hidden KKK hoods. Let this be a lesson in copyright karma, and always remember to ask for proof. Yeah, so, that was Alabama. Here in California. I'm in Minnesota. Anyways, uprooted. California bill tackles prison deportation pipeline. Moving non-U.S. citizens for deportation after they finish their prison sentences is double punishment, activists say. And I would say that as well. Go away, ads. Not gonna pronounce that because I would probably slaughter it. A child entered the United States in 1981, fleeing the Khmer Rouge genocide with his family from their native Cambodia. Family resettled in Long Beach, California. He joined a gang and a fight with a rival group, landed in prison on a murder conviction in 1996. During the subsequent 6 years in prison, the person started to mentor other incarcerated people, especially those from refugee communities, who were coping with the legacies of violent disposition. He earned a certificate in domestic violence counseling and was granted parole this year, hoping to see his new skills help others in his community. But upon release, the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation handed him over to the U.S. Federal Immigration Enforcement Agency, the ICE. While this person was a lawful permanent resident of the United States, his status as non-citizen and convictions for serious crime opened him up to potential deportation. Doesn't matter if you are a citizen legally. You can be deported, apparently. Which is BS. In 2020, California's prison system handed over about 1,600 people to the ICE after they had completed their prison sentences. According to the immigration rights group Asian Law Caucus, that figure does not include transfers conducted by local jails, which also transferred more than 1,600 people to the ICE in 2019. While such collaboration is common in the U.S., it is not mandatory. And apparently there's a bill in California state legislature to stop it. California's law enforcement groups have opposed the bill, saying last year that there should be a point in the most egregious cases where we do not provide protections for dangerous persons from enforcement. That's That no. No, these are still people. A spokesperson for the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees ICE, defended the practice of deporting people who have completed their prison sentences. She told Al Jazeera in an email that the agency continues to focus its limited resources on cases of greatest importance to national interest and public safety. But yeah, I agree with the argument that people who have paid their debt to society deserve a chance to be reunited with their communities, regardless of immigration status. Now, there's a lot of problems with the prison system, and I think a prison system based off of rehabilitation instead of punishment would be better, but that's a long-term goal. This is a problem right now. Yeah, those who have completed their sentence should not be punished again through deportation. Yeah, there is a sentence prescribed by a judge. Yeah, that's BS. An ICE agent came to visit me before I was released and told me CDCR allows me to set the date to come pick you up. Up to the minute the prison van dropped me off, I was afraid ICE was just going to show up and take me to a detention center. Which that is also a problem because of the detention centers, also known as concentration camps, are something that the ICE loves to partake in. Not what I said. Closed captioning, stop. Do I need to give you like a horny bonk? Closed captioning, jeez. Yeah, no, this is just BS that they even allow that. So, also in California, great pride event organized by an anti-LGBTQ and anti-abortion group ended in violence when the few dozen participants clashed with LGBTQ plus counter-protesters. Police wearing tactical riot gear arrested 3 people and detained 4 before using pepper ball guns to clear out the area, which is... I'm pretty sure there's several war crimes that police are allowed to do in America. 250 people rode outside a Planned Parenthood as part of a straight pride event organized by National Straight Pride Coalition on Saturday. No one arrested lives in the county. The network touted the protest, now in its 4th year, as a celebration of heterosexuality, masculinity, femininity, babies, born and unborn, and Western straight civilization, our wonderful country and Christianity, according to its website. So it's a Christian nationalist group. The National Straight Pride Coalition members joined the Proud Boys because apparently with these groups, you know, after they go fash, they can't go back. Yeah, it's a far-right group of Western chauvinists. The Capitol riots, yeah. Hundreds of LGBTQ plus people had already assembled at the meeting point, leading to intense skirmishes between the two, police said. The force noted that the number of pro-LGBTQ plus counter-protesters far outnumbered the straight people. Or, sorry, the straight pride people, I should say, just to be clear about it. But, counter-protesters came with signs reading "Fascists are not welcome" and "Straight pride is hate pride," which those do actually sound like pretty good signs. Within 20 minutes, Modesto police declared an unlawful assembly and called on both groups to disperse after a firecracker ignited a bush and objects were thrown. Officers naturally aggressively pushed the LGBTQ plus activists into the Planned Parenthood car park, and the straight pride attendees had been moved to Wendy's parking lot. Yeah, yeah. Also, because Christian nationalists want to do their best to get us back to the early 1900s and late 1800s, they have a problem with women playing sports. Yep. Who knew that their opposition to trans women playing women's sports would then go into them just hating women's sports? Can't have those women get too strong and learn how to fight for themselves. No, you gotta clearly they need to go against all women in women's sports. Are they out there wearing dresses and skirts while they're playing sports? Are they learning to be feminine women? Super important for right-wing Christians. Turns out some far-right Christians aren't just opposed to trans girls playing on trans sports, they're opposed to any girls playing sports at all. And that opposition may have landed one Christian school in legal trouble. Valley Christian Academy in Santa Maria, California, recently forfeited its scheduling October 29th football game against nearby Coast Union High School after discovering that Coast Union High School has 2 girls on its team. While it might seem strange that women should be allowed to play on sports teams that are predominantly men, it's actually required under Title IX of 1972 federal law that prohibits sex discrimination in sports. Within any schools that receive federal government funding, Title IX states, in sports where a girls' team is not available, girls must be allowed to try out for the boys' team and participate on the same basis as boys. VCA hasn't issued a public comment about its forfeit against CUHS. However, the school explained its similar decision to forfeit a football game last year against Cuyama Valley High School because it had a girl on its team. Just letting that sink in a little bit. At the time, VCA lead pastor and school superintendent Joel Mickelson told the Santa Maria Times, "Football is a violent game, and we understand the value of such training in our young men within the boundaries of an organized sport." CUH, as his head coach Andre Crosby told the Tribune that he's upset that the VCA singled out the two girls on his team just because of their gender. The girl's name is Sarah, blah, blah, blah. Crosby said that he would never force Reed and Aguilar to stay off the field to accommodate VCA, nor does he want the girls to feel like the cancellation of the game is their fault. "It's not fair," he said, "and I hope that because of the support of their families, the team, and community, that they can have the confidence that we support them. They're part of our team and will suit up for every game." The forfeited game will still count as a victory for CUHS. However, VCA's decision to forfeit its games could have violated federal law and state rules for student athletes. When VCA canceled its game again, the CBHS last year, or CUHS. That was a bit of a typo there. It sent a letter to the school stating that its female athlete wouldn't be allowed to compete on the VCA campus. That letter may have violated Title IX. The letter may also have violated the California Interscholastic Federation rules requiring schools to comply with Title IX. Parent of the player has since filed a lawsuit against the VCA seeking a jury trial, unspecified damages over loss of education, career opportunities, reputation, well-being, and attorney's fees. It's essentially trying to stop the VCA from committing such sex-based discrimination in the future. Unsurprisingly, VCA isn't the only group of Christians who are against girls playing sports. Tanner Furr of the Steadfast Baptist Church in Watauga, Texas, a man who has said that lesbians deserve violent deaths, recently said he's against girls playing any organized sports because sports cause girls to be more masculine. It's the end of the world, tomboys. Totally worst thing. Are they out there wearing dresses and skirts while they're playing sports? Are they learning to be feminine women? For asked in a recent sermon. No, that's not what sports do to women. My daughters are not going to be in any organized sports team. For the record, some women hockey players do actually wear skirts. But that doesn't matter because with Christian misogyny in general, fundamentalist opposition to women athletes isn't really about preserving femininity, it's about controlling girls' bodies, freedoms, and life choices. Yeah. That sounds about right. So, Lauren Boebert says student loan forgiveness is funding lesbian dance theory degrees, which I am not aware of. Lesbian dance theory. Republican Representative Lauren Boebert has bizarrely claimed President Joe Biden's student loan forgiveness plan is funding degrees in lesbian dance theory. So it's claims during the Lauren Boebert claims during a random interview with Fox News' Sean Hannity on President Joe Biden's plans to scrap up to $20,000 of student debt for millions of Americans. And quote here, how the heck can Joe Biden call America First conservatives a threat to democracy with a straight face and a dry diaper, she said. He's the one who has allowed millions to invade our southern border. He's the one who's robbing hardworking Americans to pay for Karen's daughter's degree in lesbian dance theory. Confusing speech by Boebert garnered a confused and resentful response on social media. Yeah, if I only could have majored in lesbian dance theory, I'd be a TikTok billionaire and wouldn't need student loans relief. Yeah. She's the quiet part out loud and said homophobia to her list of character flaws. One said, yeah, it's Lauren Boebert got roasted for saying awful stuff. So, I'm pretty sure this has been covered by a lot of people. But this is one of several. Didn't Boebert miss college anyways? I don't know. But yeah, like I said, I'm pretty sure this story has been covered plenty of places elsewhere, but I don't believe I covered it. 16-year-old forced to give birth after Florida court says teen is not mature enough to seek an abortion. So, Florida court determined that 16-year-old girl who's pregnant and parentless must give birth because she was not sufficiently mature enough to make a decision to end her pregnancy, but definitely mature enough and financially stable enough to raise a child. Apparently, they this is so BS. Teenager named in court papers as Jane Doe was appealing Judge Friedrichowitz ruling, but a 3-judge panel of the state's first district of appeals supported the judge's decision. The court papers state that the teenager was 10 weeks pregnant at the time of the first ruling. The teenager had not established by clear and convincing evidence that she was sufficiently mature to decide whether to terminate her pregnancy. She can't decide what, like a child can't decide whether to how to terminate a pregnancy, but they want her to go through with it, which is so many levels of fucked up. However, Judge McCarr wrote that the appeals court should reconsider the case back for the possibility of further consideration based on the teenager's circumstances. The trial judge apparently sees this matter as a very close call, finding that the minor was credible, open with the judge, and non-evasive. Trial judge must have been contemplating that the minor, who was 10 weeks pregnant at the time, would potentially be returning before long, given the statutory time constraints at play. To shore up any lingering doubt the trial court harbored. Children shouldn't have kids. That's messed up. Plenty of quote-unquote good families want infants. She should get paid to adopt, because that's how nothing works. Yeah. McCarr further explained that the teenager is parentless but has an appointed guardian with whom she lives. She's pursuing a GED. with involvement in a program designed to assist young women who have experienced trauma in their lives by providing educational support and counseling. Minor experienced renewed trauma shortly before she decided to seek termination of her pregnancy. He explained the teenager insisted she was not ready to be a mother because she's 16. She is sufficiently mature to make the decision, saying she is not ready to have a baby. She doesn't have a job. She's still in school, and the father is unable to assist her. The guardian is fine with what she wants to do. The judge still left the option to reevaluate the decision if the teen returned to juvenile court. This is so many levels of BS. Florida bans abortions after 15 weeks under a new law passed ahead of Roe v. Wade's revival. The previous law allowed the procedure until 24 weeks of pregnancy. So this teenager has about a month, possibly less, to sort this out. What is wrong with this country? A lot of this wrong with this country, but yeah. Naturally, because this is a very hateful time in parts of America. School says LGBTQ students will be asked to leave immediately if discovered. Student said the school's administrator ranted about how if you're gay, you're going to hell, and said he would find LGBTQ students and kick them out. A school in Florida, because Florida is being awful again, sent an aggressive email comparing homosexuality to incest. Strangely, something which a lot of the people who are against abortion seem to be fine with, so long as it's parent-daughter incest. I'm not going to go into that. Students who were found participating in these lifestyles will be asked to leave the school immediately, read an email sent by Grace Christian School Administrator Barry McKean this past June. The email had the subject line, "Important school policy point of emphasis. Please read. We believe that God created mankind in his image, male man and female woman." So, like, this is why a lot of Judaism considers God effectively to be non-binary, because if God created humans in God's image, then God would have to be both a man and a woman, because otherwise women would not be in God's image. But that's beside the point. Sexually different but with equal dignity. Read the email from the Valrico, Florida school. So, oh God. Therefore, one's biological sex must be affirmed, and no attempts shall be made to physically change, alter, or disagree with one's biological gender. There is no biological gender. And biological sex really only is used for discussing species. Anyways, including, but not limited to, elective sex reassignment. Oh God. Really old terminology: transvestite, transgender, or non-binary gender fluid acts of conduct. I don't know why it's, because I seriously doubt that's a biblical quote. So is this person just throwing Bible? Let mankind in our image and our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock. In which God created them, male and female, and created them. God blessed them and said, "Be fruitful, increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it, rule over the fish, seas, bird, and sky, and every other living creature that moves the ground." Yeah, this doesn't say anything against any alterations or anything like that. So I don't know why. So the first part has a loose connection to Genesis 1:26 to 28, but like honestly, this is BS. Which is often the case, I think, with some pastors. They just throw in Bible quote, whatever Bible quote is loosely associated with something they say to imply that the Bible itself is against all of these, when the Bible doesn't really talk about that. Anyways. Oh god. There's more. We believe that any form of homosexuality, lesbianism, bisexuality, trans identity / lifestyle, self-identification, bestiality, no one's arguing for bestiality, incest, no one but some conservatives are arguing for incest, fornication, that's just sex, isn't it? Adultery and pornography are sinful in the sight of God and the church. Okay. I do not believe that these quotes say what this person says. Therefore, a man leaves his father and his mother and cleaves to his wife, and they become one flesh. That's just saying people fuck. That's just saying people fuck. That's saying men fuck women. Okay. Leviticus 1:18 to 1:30. Oh, sorry. Leviticus 18:130. Do not lie with a man as one lies with a woman. That's detestable. Various translations have let's see here. Do not take your wife's sister as rival wife and have sexual relations with her while your wife is living. Do not approach a woman to have sexual relations during the uncleanness of her monthly period. Do not have sexual relations with your neighbor's wife and defile yourself with her. Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Moloch. For you must not profane the name of your God. I am Lord. Do not lie with a man. One lies with a woman that's detestable. So that, depending on translation, that could be talking about not having sex with boys. Do not have sexual relations with an animal. Don't do bestiality. I think that's something everyone can agree with. Blah blah. Basically, don't do stuff that this person considers bad. Okay. Romans. Even the women exchange their natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. Isn't... Wait, who's Romans written by? So I don't think this is a Jesus teaching. The only good sex is heterosexual marriage, and only if someone has potential to become pregnant. It's goofy. In the same way, men also abandoned natural relations with women and were flamed with lust for one another. Men committed shameful acts with other men, and received in themselves the due penalty for their error. Furthermore, they did not think it worthwhile to retain the knowledge of God, so God gave over them in depraved mind, every kind of wickedness, evil, and depravity. So, Romans, because I'm pretty sure, yeah, Paul is like such, Paul has a bunch of weird rules and attitudes. That's a Paul thing. That's not a Jesus thing or whatever. That's just Paul. Paul says a bunch of weird stuff in the Bible. Okay, that's just no incest. Most people agree. Most people are against incest, except for some conservative people. Corinthians. Is this another Paul? Yep. Is that a different Paul or the same Paul? There's like a bunch of these are letters. Evangelicals love Paul, and it's kind of scary. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Paul is like kind of against having sex at all. Like, they love Paul more than Jesus. But definitely not. What? Am I implying that evangelicals are worshipping an antichrist? No. What? I'm guessing Philossians. This is Philossians Paul too. Yeah. So most of these problems are the problem is Paul is really nitpicky about everything with regards to sex. And essentially it's like celibacy is the best. I think Paul would be happiest if everyone was celibate. That's my opinion based off of some of Paul's other teachings, so it doesn't surprise me that most of these are Paul. One of these probably is a translation issue, and one of them doesn't actually go against it. After he converted, Paul very well might have been celibate. Yeah, no, I think Paul might have either had an aversion to sex or been celibate, or did a thing where he was lashing out for other reasons. Maybe Paul was like the first of yeah. I'm not going to explain more because Twitch policies. The email said that parents would have to agree to all policies and procedures before a student may start school in August. Students and former students are saying the school is particularly anti-LGBTQ, even for private Christian institutions. One former student said that McKean would deliver anti-LGBTQ messages during chapel. Oh god. It's yelling, if you're gay, you're gonna go to hell, and it's Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. I mean, it was Adam and Eve and Lilith. I mean, it's Adam and Lilith, and then Adam and Eve. Because they're trying to justify the story, because the story involves God creating them both at once. So Lilith was the explanation that Lilith was created first with Adam, and then later Eve became created from Adam's rib. Because Lilith didn't like Adam or something? I don't know. It's probably other BS in there, but yeah. Through the school, I feel normal. Yeah, I am a trans alum of Grace Christian who graduated just this past year, said that LGBTQ students at the school knew they couldn't be out. It's not something I could be open about. Describing the climate of fear for LGBTQ students in the school. Only a select few of my friends could know about it. Sometimes we couldn't know if we could trust people in our friend group because we didn't know if anyone would say anything to facility or faculty. I read somewhere Paul might have taken celibacy as a penance for sins before he converted. Maybe. Yeah, it's So I have found good news in Florida. Marine heroically tackles a man who brought a grenade to an LGBTQ bar. In Florida neighborhood Wilton Manors on Tuesday, a man was tackled to the ground after he pulled out a grenade at a bar. Witnesses say the incident started with a man whose identity hasn't been released, walked into the bar and set a grenade down in front of him. "You showed me a grenade," he said. "Don't be scared," bartender told South Florida local news. "I was just thinking, stay calm, because we have a lot of people in here, and this is our community, and I want to keep everyone safe." After they talk, the bartender says the man claimed there were guns in his car as well. Bar regular and former Marine Daryl Darling overheard the exchange and moved in to help. The man was agitated at somebody in the bar looking to pick a fight. Darling recalled he had shown me a grenade immediately as I walked up. It looked real. Darling kept the man occupied in conversation and bought him a drink while the bartender called his boss, who notified the police and quietly got the rest of the crowd outside. The bartender handed me a note that said, "The guy behind me has a grenade." I grabbed my stuff and I left. While patrons made their escape, Darling says the two talked about their histories in the military and the police. I used certain intentions to just keep his focus on me so we would be the last ones leaving the bar, Darling said. When the bar was cleared out, Darling tucked the man out the front door and made his move. I grabbed one hand, swept his full leg out, and just put my full weight on the back of his body so he could not get up, Darling said. Police were waiting and took the man to custody. His grenade was a dud, apparently. Interesting, but, yeah. Surprisingly good news. And that situation sounds like it was handled really, really well. Like, impressively well. I kind of like it. So, there's a Blavity News articles that says continued colonization and erasure. Apparently, this article states that Native Hawaiians don't celebrate statehood. The history of Hawaii is rarely discussed beyond our understanding that became the 50th state of the Union on August 21st, 1959, following 61 years as territory of the U.S. But even though Statehood Day is a legal holiday in Hawaii, the way the islands became a part of this country is not a celebrated story. Historically settled by Polynesians, who were exploited as early as 1778, when the first documented non-Polynesian arrived. After that, more and more Europeans took interest in Hawaii, bringing with them diseases that killed large swaths of the original population. On January of 1893, a U.S.-supported coup d'etat invaded Oahu and to overthrow Queen Lili Uokalani, causing her to give a conditional surrender. Then President Grover Cleveland is said to have not wanted to take Hawaii by force, but seemed unable to make legal changes to overthrow the kingdom. His successor, President William McKinley, negotiated a treaty, and Hawaii officially lost its independence 2 years following the designation of Pearl Harbor as a U.S. naval base in 1898. Negative effects invasion, later annexation into the United States, and ultimately statehood continued to be felt today by Native Hawaiian people who understand the entire story to be an illegal takeover of everything from their land to their culture and all things in between. Blavity sat down with Kamaka Parker, a Native Hawaiian from Oahu, to discuss the ways the islands continue to struggle with the effects of 129 years of continued American colonization. I know, so much BS. So, Parker grew up on Oahu, surrounded by family. Her grandfather owned 9 acres of land and has 9 children. So each of his children later owned 1 acre of land surrounded by their siblings and offspring. And it's hard to explain to other people. We're indigenous Native Hawaiians, Parker said. If you think of it like a trinity, there's like the Aqua, the gods. Then there's the Aina. I'm sorry if I misbutcher Native Hawaiian language. And then there's Kanaka, the people. And we live in harmony together. So there's no separation between these 3. We have proverbs that say the land is chief, and we are its servants. And so the idea of the indigenous person caring for the land is the polar opposite of the colonizer and their ideal of it. So, like, you cannot really remove the person from the Aina if they're one with the land. Parker said that this cultural concept is hard for people who see land as money to comprehend. Which is, this would probably be better if you had someone who actually believed in the true ideals of socialism and the lack of colonization, because these people are doing good things. And we didn't let them do good things. The idea of remaining Palestinian means that there are people who've been priced out of their native land but refuse to leave the islands because it would mean leaving behind a piece of themselves. These people make up Hawaii, Hawaii's unhoused community. Our extreme poverty is probably our houseless community, and I don't like the word homeless because a lot of our houseless people are native Hawaiian, and this is their home, Parker said. They just don't have a physical structure. They're living on the beaches or in the brush, or they're these housing communities where they take good care of each other. But to ask a native Hawaiian to leave is asking them to sever their genealogical connection to something that's theirs. It's cultural, it's genealogical, it's actually in our blood. Our genealogy connects back to the land. But yeah, it's they use our culture to draw tourism, in advertising. Yeah, it's the working class has to go work to serve the tourists. So, oh god, people being put into systems where they're shamed for being Hawaiian. They just feel like we're lesser, like any colonizer. They're gonna break your system down, they're gonna break you down so you conform. It's a battle we face every day. Yeah. So, a Chicago officer faces felony charges after he was filmed pinning a 14-year-old boy to the ground with his knee. I know this is a shocking technique that a Chicago officer would be pinning a black person to the knee, to the ground with their knee, possibly affecting their breathing. I see no... What? There's been problems with that before? What? Anyway, according to CNN, the incident occurred in Park Ridge, Illinois last month, when Chicago Police Sergeant Michael Fidalaro wrongly accused the teen of stealing his son's bike. Fidalaro reportedly learned that the bicycle had been stolen at a library and later spotted outside a Starbucks. Then took his son to the location and found the bike was propped up against a pillar. The officer, who worked for the CPD since 2000, then waited in his car to hopefully observe who had stolen the bicycle. After several minutes, Fidalaro saw the 14-year-old boy, identified as J.N., riding his own bike before getting off to move the supposed stolen bike. The off-duty police officer then approached the teen and began accusing him of theft. Bystanders captured the incident on camera, showing Fidalaro putting the boy's arms behind his back before pinning him face down on the ground. Officer proceeded to kneel on J.N.'s back while as others attempted to pull him off. Witnesses say J.N., who's Puerto Rican American, arrived at the Starbucks after the bike had been placed on the sidewalk. His family simply says their son was trying to move the bicycle so he could get by. His parents and their attorney believe the incident was racially motivated. Off-duty officer used excessive force on a child and escalated the situation where this type of aggression was clearly not necessary. Racial profiling, yeah. More than a month after the incident, Fidalaro was charged with felony official misconduct and aggravated battery. The Park Ridge police confirmed he turned himself in on Thursday and was taken to Cook County courthouse for the bond hearing. Yeah. So, more awfulness in Illinois. 2 Walmarts. Allegedly refused to process a money order for a trans man. Trans man has filed a complaint with the Illinois Human Rights Department after he was denied service at 2 separate Walmart stores. Hyatt says that employees at stores Lawrenceville and Olney, Illinois, would not allow him to cash a money order because his driver's license still lists his dead name. At the time, his license did not. At the time, his license did list his gender as male and had a current photo. But Hyatt says he has been unable to afford the process of legally changing his name under the state law, according to The Hill. According to the complaint, a supervisor at one store made a face of disgust because disgust is the chief emotion that drives a lot of discrimination. When presented with Hyatt's ID, an employee at another store told Hyatt that his money order had been, quote-unquote, red flagged, which should have been a simple transaction turned into an embarrassing and painful experience, Hyatt said in the statement. Trans people like me exist in every corner of Illinois, and many of us depend on services from stores like Walmart to navigate life without outing ourselves at every turn. I didn't know Walmart even claimed to support LGBTQ rights. Walmart apparently has also been hit by multiple lawsuits from former trans employees in recent years. In 2017, the retail giant lost a federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission case when the board ruled that they had discriminated and harassed a trans woman at a Sam's Club subsidiary in Florida. Yeah. So, Sullivan Walter, a 53-year-old black man exonerated after being wrongly convicted for rape. So, yeah, there's occasionally racial profiling with regards to rape allegations. Anyways, Sullivan Walter, a 53-year-old black man who's wrongly convicted for rape more than 36 years ago in New Orleans, became free on Thursday after a judge threw out his conviction. The judge vehemently spoke up in support of Walter, saying blood and semen evidence that could have cleared him never made it to the jury. To say this was unconscionable was an understatement. Walter was arrested at the age of 17 after being accused of breaking into a home in 1986 and raping a woman who was identified as LS in the records. According to the allegations that surfaced at the time, Walter held a knife to the woman's throat and threatened to harm her 8-year-old son, who slept through the incident. The attorney said the woman was the only witness and she had mistakenly identified Walter. There were some red flags that the eyewitness testimony could well have been unreliable, Ma mentioned. The red flags were also outlined in a joint filing by the defense and prosecutors. In this case, Ellis was being asked to make a cross-racial identification of someone who at all the times that she could observe him was either masked in an unlit room at night and or threatening her not to look at him. In addition, Ellis was not shown a photo array containing Mr. Walter until over 6 weeks after the crime. Defense point out conflicting statements made by police officer who worked the case, as well as inaccuracies regarding the blood and semen evidence. Although the woman who made the accusations is now dead, Ma said her son has expressed regret on behalf of his mother about the wrongful conviction. Yeah, this should not have taken 39-year sentence, 4 for a burglary charge. So you have been in jail for 4 years, but there were 35 years for multiple charges in a very clearly wrongful rape case, and he wasn't let out until 3 years before his sentence he would have been let out anyway. I hate BS like this. Oh, we're doing something really helpful. We're stopping an act that should have been stopped 30 years ago. Also, not great in Louisiana. Black Louisiana woman denied abortion despite being told unborn baby missing its skull. Oh, I thought there'd be more to this. So apparently, a Louisiana woman pregnant with her second child has been denied her abortion despite being told that the unborn child will likely not survive. Davis learned about the baby's condition when she went to her first ultrasound. At the time, the expecting mother was told that her unborn child has acronia and that the infant's skull is not developing. The expected mother will be told that the baby will likely die shortly after being born, according to health experts. I hear that the skull is kind of important to survival. So naturally, the abortion is not allowed. Sexual assault is awful, but so are rush convictions, yes. Black couple files lawsuit over low home appraisal surging nearly $300,000 after trying whitewashing experiment. So black couple is taking up legal action after their home appraisal increased $300,000 because of race. According to the New York Times, Nathan Connolly and Shawnee Mott filed the housing discrimination lawsuit in Maryland District Court on Monday, about a year after they applied to refinance their mortgage with Iowa Depot. And you can't get artificial skull. Yeah, well, also it would have to be implanted before the birthing process, which would also be incredibly difficult. Even if it was an option. So Connolly, a professor at Johns Hopkins University, says he and his wife purchased the Baltimore home for $450,000 in 2017 and have since completed renovations worth more than $35,000. Furthermore, Baltimore house values have surged 42% over the past 5 years, which is why the two were shocked to learn that Maryland-based 2020 valuations had valued their home at just $472,000. As a result, mortgage lender Ion Depot denied the pair's refinance loan. Conley and Mott says they challenged the appraisal, but the loan officer stopped responding to their calls. The initial inspection was conducted. So Dr. Conley, Dr. Mott, and their 3 children were home during the visit, and their house was also filled with family photos, children's drawings, a figure with dark skin, a poster for the film Black Panther, and literature by Black authors. The lawsuit reads, "It would have been obvious to anyone visiting that the home belonged to a Black family." After he and his wife removed any indications that Black people lived there, a second appraiser valued it at $750K. Okay, so months after the initial appraisal, they reapplied for a loan, but tried what the suit calls a whitewashing experiment, removing indicators of their race and giving the impression that a white family resided there. They cleared their bookshelves of works by Black authors, they asked white friends to share family photos, and placed those in the picture frames around the house. On their walls, they hung art bought at IKEA and showed white people, the Times reports. The couple also recruited a white colleague to stand in for them during the appraisal. Once the inspection was completed, a second appraiser valued their home at $750,000. We're clearly aware of the appraisal discrimination, but to be told in so many words that our presence and the life we built in our home brings the property value down, it's an absolute gut punch. Yeah. So, Massachusetts first in the nation, apparently, to open colleges to students with, I apologize for the language used in this, by the way. Today, Governor Baker signed into law a bill giving students with intellectual disabilities and or autism. Now, obviously, you can go to school if you pass enough with intellectual disabilities and autism. But if you don't, this is essentially not requiring you passing to be allowed in schools. So, new law allows individuals with, they refer to as severe intellectual disabilities, although severe autism spectrum disorders or other severe developmental disabilities to participate in undergraduate academic courses, internships, work-based training, etc., etc. And all other aspects of campus life that includes other students not participating under this section. Such individuals should not be required to take any standardized college entrance aptitude test, have a high school diploma or its equivalent, meet high school course requirements, meet minimum grade point average requirements, or obtain a passing score on the statewide assessment test utilized as a basis for acceptance. So, essentially a lot of that relates to passability and if the person is different enough. An individual shall not be denied an opportunity to participate in higher education solely due to the individual's disability status. Public institutions of higher education, in consultation with the Department of Higher Education and consistent with the purposes of this section, shall also establish course selection guidelines to ensure that participating individuals select courses that are appropriate to their individual strengths, needs, preferences, and interests. So, yeah, it's messed up that this isn't the case all over the place. So, in Mississippi on Fridays, authorities with the Oxford Police Department released a statement asserting the recent killings and disappearance of Jimmy Lee, an out black student at the University of Mississippi, was a quote-unquote isolated incident. The statement comes 3 days after Lafayette County judge determined that there was a probable cause for police to arrest Sheldon Timothy Harrington Jr., a 22-year-old Ole Miss graduate, for Lee's murder, and that he should be held without bond. Based on the information collected to date, our investigators believe this crime represents an isolated incident stemming from the relationship between Jay Lee and Tim Harrington. So, Lee's former roommate, Braylon Johnson, who's also a black and LGBTQ, told Insider for a lot of gay people there were scared. Especially for gay black men. They're scared, they're terrified. At Harrington's bond hearing Tuesday, prosecutors introduced Snapchat messages between Harrington and Lee talking about hooking up and showed a video of a police interview in which Harrington says he'd been in a sexual relationship with Lee. Prosecutors said Harrington's motive for committing first-degree murder was his fear of being outed. Lee googled how long does it take to strangle someone at 5:56 a.m. just 2 minutes before Lee was last seen alive on surveillance footage, leaving his apartment in a silver robe, gold sleeping cap, and slippers. Gabby Petito refers to the case of a young woman murdered by her fiance in 2021 by blunt force injuries to the head and neck with manual strangulation. So this is one of those cases where this wouldn't have happened if it was if this wouldn't have happened if society didn't consider it a problem to be gay. This crime would not have happened. Yeah. So apparently Missouri school district has has at the very least tried to, or possibly succeeded in bringing back the paddle. The Cassville School District in Missouri announced on Tuesday that a new policy is set to be implemented in which students can be punished with a paddle, can be spanked with a paddle. School District Superintendent Marilyn Johnson said parents were notified of the board's approval of the policy in June. It will require written permission from a student's family before such a method is used when other means of discipline have failed, and then only in reasonable form when the principal approves it. Still messed up. Policy indicates swatting the buttocks with a paddle is the only form of physical punishment allowed, and if used, it be provided by the school's principal in the presence of a witness, but not in front of their fellow students. Yeah, it's in a few states. Oh, God. Number of swats could depend on the age of the students, with older children receiving as many as 3 and younger kids getting 1 or 2. When it becomes necessary to use corporal punishment, it shall be administered so that there can be no chance of bodily injury or harm. I mean, swatting someone with a paddle is always going to cause bodily injury and harm, and it's messed. Parents have said, why can't you paddle my student? We're like, we can't paddle your student. Our policy does not support that. Bad parenting. Johnson claims the response among parents with children in Cassville School District has been overwhelmingly positive. We've had people actually thank us for it, he said. Surprisingly, those on social media will probably be appalled to hear us saying any of these things, but the majority of people I'd run into have been supportive. School corporal punishment was deemed unconstitutional by U.S. Supreme Court in 1977. The ruling essentially left the decision to keep this form of discipline up to each state, and Missouri was one of 19 chose to... Oh, God. Okay. That's horrifying. So, Walmart. Apparently, Walmart's in the news today, Munch. They're urged to pay $4.4 million to black man for racial profiling. I misread his name. I thought he had the best name ever. It was Michael Mangum. But I read that I'd swapped the N and the G. I thought it was Michael Magnum, which would be the best name ever. Filed a lawsuit against supermarket chain last year after employee racially profiled him. Mangum, who is black, sued Walmart after he alleged he was followed by a security worker in Woodville, Oregon store. Per CBS News, in court documents, Mangum said he went to the Walmart location to purchase a light bulb for his refrigerator, but no security worker, Joe Williams, followed him around the store. He then confronted the worker, who threatened to call the police if he did not leave. When he refused to leave the premises because he was just buying a light bulb, Williams allegedly said he would tell authorities that Mangum had threatened him with violence. His jobs would have been at great risk had he been charged with a crime, but he refused to be intimidated by Williams' lies and bullying, and apparently some people at Walmart not liking black people being in their store. Almost like discrimination hasn't gone away. Fancy that. So, Megan works for a housing project in Portland and also serves as an at-risk youth counselor. Williams, meanwhile, no longer works for Walmart, according to the company's spokesperson, who called the settlement excessive. Mr. Mangum has never stopped by Walmart's asset protection. Hargrove claims he interfered with our associates as they were surveilling and then stopped confirmed shoplifters and then refused to leave despite being asked repeatedly by our staff and Multnomah County deputies. The incident happened on March 26, 2020, and Williams remained employed there until he was fired in July 2020 for the mishandling of $35 of Walmart property. Yeah, Walmart's awful. So, 2 trans people shot dead by police during mental health crisis. So, Police kill neurodivergent people if they're too different. So, Maddie Hoffman, a 47-year-old trans woman and parent of 2 young children, was shot and killed by police on the 19th of May during a wellness check at their home in Malvern, Pennsylvania. The Chester County District Attorney's Office claimed the police shooting was quote-unquote justified and isn't indicating the officers who shot Hoffman 3 times leading to their death, or isn't indicting, the officers. The police report detailed a struggle over a firearm as the quote-unquote justification for the shooting. Police found Hoffman in their home experiencing a mental health crisis and yelling that they were in a crisis situation. Investigators said the struggle and shooting happened in less than a minute. Hoffman was born in Korea and raised their adopted family in New Jersey and Vermont, according to GoFundMe, created in honor of the late trans woman. Maddie's family is devastated by this loss. Nationwide, police are usually the first responders to people with mental health crises, the campaign said. Continues, they're often not trained to provide proper support, and the results have been deadly and devastating. Yeah, police always come into situations, mental health crises situations, with guns ready. I mean, not always, but like a lot. That happened to, I knew someone once who had police called for that person's mental health crises, and that person could have been killed by police. Luckily, that person was not harmed in that instant. But it's one of the reasons why 911 oftentimes is not good for mental health crises in America. Maddie's family wishes to elevate this important issue so that it does not happen to another person ever again. Just a few weeks after Hoffman's death, another trans person was killed in a deadly encounter with police. Jasper Aaron Lynch was having a mental health crisis when authorities were called to his McLean, Virginia home on the 7th of July. Police respond to a call made by a friend who is concerned about Lynch, who went by Aaron, and his well-being. According to Washington Post, it was reported that police arrived with a special unit, including a person on the crisis intervention team and a clinician. Authorities were not able to locate Lynch during their first visit, but the police returned a second time. This time, 3 officers trained in crisis intervention went into the house. Officers encountered Lynch in the house, holding a bottle and an object described as a large decorative wooden tribal mask in the Washington Post. There's back and forth with police, but police said that Lynch threw the mask at an officer and began to swing the bottle in a striking motion. One officer then fired his gun, shooting Lynch 4 times. Aaron was pronounced dead at the scene. Now, in self-defense laws, which obviously don't apply to police officers, which is BS, you're not supposed to use more force than the other person. All officers involved in Lynch's death have been placed on restricted duty, and an administrative investigation by the police is pending, according to the Washington Post. Lynch's parents condemned their son's death in a statement released in local media, saying the shooting cannot be justified, which I would agree with. Parents said Lynch was experiencing severe mental health crisis and was scared, asking for both of the 911 calls that were made that day. His parents believed the officers who attended the second time could have and should have handled this far differently. To respond to Aaron's mental health crisis by shooting him at all, let alone multiple times, cannot be justified. Yeah. Like I said, if you act different enough, or if you are in distress, police are not a good people to try to get to help. So, armed volunteers guard drag bunch amid protests in Texas. Armed volunteers were seen outside Anderson Distillery and Grill on Sunday after tension between right-wing protesters and counter-protesters escalated during a drag event in Roanoke, Texas. Fox 4 reports. Dallas investigative journalist Stephen Monticelli reported a video of the incident showing protesters shouting at each other as police officer attempted to intervene. Though the Barrel Babes Drag Bunch event was described on Facebook as a place where kindness and inclusion meets fabulous fun, protesters were furious about the brunch. Distillery owner whose son was hosting the event was quick to shut down the speculation about the show. Caused by, they're always Protect Texas Kids, a nonprofit that aims to protect children from the toxic indoctrinating agenda of the left. It's just... Despite the protests, the distillery thanked its many supporters for attending the brunch. Yes, every table was full before we officially opened. Yes, we reached maximum capacity and had a wait list to get inside. Yes, we ran out of food. Yes, we passed the quote-unquote no sexual content inspection from the Texas Comptroller's Office. And yes, love won today, it wrote in a Facebook post. Texas school board bans teachers from saying trans people exist. A local school board in Texas has adopted a sweeping new set of guidelines that ban discussion of the existence of trans people. Sorry, I don't exist. Oh no, I've disappeared. Nobody can figure out where I am. No, I guess this is what happens when you don't exist. Wrong camera. So, a local school board in Texas, which they call the existence of trans people, which they call gender fluidity and critical race theory, prohibits the use of pronouns that aren't aligned with the sex on a student's birth certificate. Yeah, but if you don't know the sex assigned at the birth certificate, technically you're supposed to use they, them pronouns. But, so you can't, that's the whole point of they, them pronouns, is to describe unknown genders, or to describe, to be used to, simplify things when gender and sex are deemed important. And while some of that's falling apart due to the fact that society does not have the strict gender rules anymore, this is not a law that can be realistically supported, because they, them is used as a singular pronoun. Anyways, and you also don't check the students' birth certificates. Like, if you find someone, you don't look at their birth certificate and be like, oh, you must be a he, him, or a she, her. No, nobody fucking does that. The new guideline approved by Grapevine Colleyville Independent School District near Dallas are the result of a concerted campaign organized by the conservative Christian group Patriot Mobile Action, which is likely an unpatriotic group that values Christian nationalism over oh wow, I'm having a brain fart. I'm just like, the Bill of Independence? No, the Constitution, that's what I was trying to think of. Dear God. I blame high school education. No, which has spent millions of doctors electing conservative majorities to Texas school boards. Hundreds of residents showed up, with the majority speaking out against the proposed restrictions. Among the far-right wish list of prohibitions, the new rules include guidance based on flawed definitions. Quote-unquote, gender fluidity is defined in the text as any theory or ideology that, one, espouses the view that biological sex is merely a social construct, not something espoused by 90% of people, espouses the view that it's possible for a person to be any gender or none. Gender, on the other hand, is a social construct. Espouses the view that an individual's biological sex should be changed to match a self-believed gender that is different from the person's biological sex. Gender fluidity is actually the idea that a person's gender identity or expression can change over time. What the school board is calling gender fluidity is in fact the idea that trans people exist at all. The district also banned the use of pronouns for students and teachers in any manner that is inconsistent with the biological sex of such person. The district also limited the use of restrooms and other facilities to the one associated with the person's gender on their biological birth certificate. Biological birth certificate. Last I checked, birth certificates are not biological. If I grabbed my birth certificate, I'm pretty sure it wouldn't be like a fleshy substance. I don't know what they think a birth certificate is, but it's not biological. The district also banned teaching certain aspects of the history of racism in the U.S., specifically citing the 1619 Project and quote-unquote critical race theory, a catch-all term used by conservatives to describe teaching about racism in history. Over 100 people spoke in opposition to the proposal, including a United Methodist pastor who said the guidelines reflect a fascist agenda that does not represent Christian values. Yeah. Judge blocks Utah's trans sports ban for being discriminatory, because it is. So, a state's judge issued an order against Utah's new trans sports ban, allowing trans students and athletes to continue to participate in school sports. And given the fact that this will likely lead, like banning trans girls from school sports will likely lead to banning all girls from school sports, because that is likely the direction they're pushing things, based on the fact that there are people who are already proposing that women shouldn't be in sports. Yeah, so the ruling comes in a lawsuit brought by the families of 3 trans students this past May who argued that the sports ban was based on unfounded stereotypes, fears, and misconceptions about girls who are trans. It is not supported by medical or scientific evidence. Judge Kelly agreed, and they were likely to win their claims, and said that the law is causing harm by singling them out for unfavorable treatment as trans girls. Yeah, some of these people receive puberty blockers and all this stuff. Anyways. Children's Hospital gets death and bomb threats after libs of TikTok claims kids are sterilized there. National Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C. has been targeted with bomb and death threats after the far-right anti-LGBTQ Twitter account Libs of TikTok falsely claimed that the hospital was performing hysterectomies on trans children, which is nobody does that. Not on trans children. Now, disabled children do sometimes end up in circumstances where those sorts of acts are recommended, but chances are the person or people running Libs of TikTok would likely be happy about the concept of disabled people ending up with hysterectomies. And post may have caused the Twitter access for Libs of TikTok to be suspended, as it hasn't tweeted since last Friday. Last Friday, Libs of TikTok founder Chaya Reichik posted an audio recording of her discussion with hospital telephone operators, said that a 16-year-old trans boy would be eligible for hysterectomy at the hospital's gender development clinic. Now, a 16-year-old is not a child. One operator told Reichik that a 16-year-old would be in the clear, was not a young child, I should say, to receive the operation. Now, 16-year-olds old generally in a lot of countries is considered old enough for medical consent, which is different from other types of consent since that relates generally medical institutions are assumed to not be there to rape and harm people, although circumstances like that do happen in medical facilities on occasion. A second operator told her that all different types of age groups come in for the operation, that kids younger than 16 have come in for the procedure. The hospital has since said that the telephone operators provide incorrect information. The World Professional Association for Trans Health has said that hysterectomies shouldn't be performed on minors. None of the people are secretly recorded by this activist group deliver care to our patients. We do not and never perform gender-affirming hysterectomies for anyone under the age of 18. So this is one of those things where there are exceptions. Pediatric chemotherapy leads to sterilization frequently. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, given the nature of chemotherapy. On August, reposted 13 tweets and a right-wing expose claiming that Boston Children's Hospital in Massachusetts was conducting gender-affirming surgery on children as young as 2 or 3 years old. An obvious lie Physicians at the hospitals received so many death threats, harassing calls, and emails that the hospital had to hire extra security and gave doctors new guidance on responding to threats. But yeah, man tackled by security at DC hotel after threatening to shoot gay people. This is also the sorts of things that this attitude leads to. DC police have arrested a man who allegedly used anti-gay slurs while threatening hotel workers with a gun. Court documents describe how Dylan Nation, 21, was staying at the Carlisle Hotel near the LGBTQ neighborhood of DuPont Circle when he got into an argument with his girlfriend at 1:20 p.m. this past Wednesday. A hotel security worker saw them arguing and quote-unquote stepped in. Nation allegedly told the security guard he needed to get his face wash from his car, but instead he went to his car to get his gun. The girlfriend told the guard that Nation had a gun in his car, so the guard went out to find Nation arguing with another hotel worker. Security worker told Nation not to bring the gun to the hotel because it's not allowed, and then that's when Nation allegedly pointed a gun at him and said he will blow his skull off. Security guard took away his gun and took out the bullets and told someone to call police. He argued to trying to get his gun back. The court documents say the audio caught in the security camera footage. He can allegedly be heard saying the hotel workers are not tough because they're from the F-slur part of DC. Autoimmune treatment can cause sterilization too. And that his gun was only for F-slurs and pussies, the records say. Then Nation tried to flee when he heard police were coming, but the security guard tackled him to the sidewalk. Or on the sidewalk, sorry. Nation, who lives in Tennessee, has a preliminary hearing today. The incident is not being investigated as a hate crime. I can understand why it's not being investigated as a hate crime, although hateful speech was used, suggesting that this person was... There was potential that this person would commit hate crimes in the future had he not been stopped by this heinous act. So, cop fatally shot a man moments after he carried his dad's casket to Hearst. Because racism, I believe. A man wanted by the U.S. Marshals and other law enforcement agencies was fatally shot at his father's funeral on Wednesday. According to authorities, the shooting occurred after Jason Owens pulled a gun on officers attempting to take him into custody. Oh, okay. This might have been this might be a more interesting story. Owens was a pallbearer at his father's funeral. According to the WB News, law enforcement was outside the Amos Carvelli funeral home in Nutter Fort, West Virginia, when they spotted him. Harrison County Sheriff Robert Matheny said they believed Owens was armed, though he could not confirm if a weapon was found at the scene. Oh, that's not good. That could possibly be racism. Let's dive deeper into this. See if this is a racism. After Owens helped take his father's casket to a hearse, officers approached the grieving son and tried to arrest him. Officers said he pulled out a gun before being shot. He just took his dad out and put him in the car, carried the casket out, and he came over and I was hugging him, and next thing you know, someone yelled, "Jason," and then, boom, 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 boom. Evelyn Odell Owens' aunt said, "He didn't have a chance to do nothing." I went to hug him because he was upset, and next thing I know, they just yelled Jason, and they shot a ton. I about got shot. I felt compressions of the bullets. It was horrible. Odell, this report, WBOI reports Odell was not injured during the shooting. Odell said, although, I mean, almost getting shot is still bad, but Bill says she is traumatized after the incident. I'm distraught. I'm totally upset. I was getting ready to lay my brother in the ground, and I shot his son. It's a mess. An investigation into the shooting is currently underway. Yeah, this sounds like a racism by police. That's my assessment. I could be wrong, but I get the impression that this is a racism. Biden canceled some student loan debt with a flick of a pen. Here's how it impacts Black Americans, according to BLAFD News. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer and Senator Elizabeth Warren were praising Joe Biden after he announced his latest plan to cancel some student loan debt on Wednesday. Biden announces $10,000 federal student loan cancellation per student making $125K or less per year. I mean, admittedly, he should just cancel significantly more, just tons of student loan debt. Additional $10K canceled for Pell Grant recipients. The loan forgiveness plan is expected to provide significant relief for Black Americans in particular due to the lack of generational wealth. A typical Black borrower will see their balance cut nearly in half, and more than 1 in 4 Black borrowers will see their balance forgiven altogether. So that's at least something. However, White House so apparently there are Republicans who criticized the student loan forgiveness. So in 24 hours since Joe Biden, this is from the Complex, so 24 hours since Joe Biden announced a plan to forgive $10K in student loan debt for those earning less than $125K a year, a number of conservative legislators have spoken out against the initiative. Marjorie Taylor Greene said it was completely unfair for the government to say a person's debt is completely forgiven. Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene did have a bunch forgiven apparently through other stuff. $2.3 million in PPP loans. Yeah, that's not the White House information thread went on, including Matt Gaetz, quickly having had $3.8 million forgiven in PPP loans. Okay, so they don't want poor people to have forgiven loans, just the rich people. Gotcha. Judge blocks Biden administration requiring religious doctors to provide trans health care. Of course, U.S. Court of Appeals on the Fifth Circuit unanimously ruled Friday that the Department of Health and Human Resources mandate is in violation of its sincerely held religious beliefs by not letting medical providers to withhold care on the basis of sex. So the three-judge panel upheld a lower court's ruling that Franciscan Alliance, a Catholic healthcare network covering Indiana and Illinois, was right to seek out a permanent injunction against the policy. So, yeah, this is... And the judges, two of whom were appointed by Donald Trump, agreed. That makes sense. Education is a luxury, apparently. Yeah, that's certainly how they... far too many rich people want education to be a luxury, not a right. Because if you don't know, if you learn stuff, you are likely to take positions that are further left. So Republicans are inherently anti-religion, or sorry, not anti-religion. I mean, anti-religion, that's not Christianity, but anti-education is what I meant to say. So, yeah. So, apparently this is Dallas Morning News. I should have had this earlier. Churches shouldn't need the ADA to tell them to welcome the disabled. Jesus welcomed worshipers with disabilities. Broken neck left me with quadriplegia 55 years ago. Back then, I would arrive at a restaurant only to be told to wheel down an alley past smelly dumpsters and into a side door that led through a crowded, noisy kitchen in order to reach my dining table. Following deep depression, in the late 1980s, I somehow landed the position of the National Council on Disability under President Reagan. One of the first initiatives our council tackled was the lack of access in public places. Finally, in 1990, I sat on the White House lawn with other council members and watched as the ADA was signed into law. Like a higher law is needed, especially in the church. This is an opinion piece. I don't necessarily agree with all the opinions of this. I should have mentioned that earlier. Especially in the church. Jesus tells us in Luke 14:13 to invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. At Journey and Friends, we take this directive to heart. We envision a world where every person with a disability finds hope, dignity, and their place in the body of Christ. Now, I am not a Christian, so I can't say to that, but I do know there are principles in the Bible in which churches do not abide by. Too often, churches which are exempt from ADA compliance under the Religious Tenets Clause struggle to make worship services, facilities, and programs accessible. So, the ADA's Religious Tenets Clause may protect churches from federal oversight, but the exemption should not be viewed as an excuse to ignore ADA standards. Churches must answer to higher law of God's love. And so we continue to advocate for congregations to embrace disabled people. And Yeah, it is very much. There are lots of lines from Jesus about helping disabled people and attacking capitalism, which is not really liked by anything. So protesters demand to end a law that allows Mormon Church to not report child abuse. Mormon leaders and sex abuse survivors are protesting Utah state legislature to change a law that allows church officials not to report any admissions of child sexual abuse that occur during a religious confession. Protests have occurred amidst an investigation report by the AP, which accused the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, i.e. the Mormon Church, of misusing an internal reporting helpline to divert abuse accusations against church members away from law enforcement and instead to church attorneys, who may bury the problem, leaving victims in harm's way. AP's report examined child sex abuse lawsuits against the church. One such lawsuit, brought by the molested children of convicted sex abuser Paul Douglas Adams, accused the church of allowing their molestation to continue even after Adams admitted the abuse to church bishop John Herod. The church attorney said that because Adams' admission to the crime occurred during a confession, Bishop Herod and his fellow bishop Robert Mousy were legally bound to keep the abuse secret under clergy penitent privilege. Adams continued molesting kids for 7 more years until he was arrested in 2017 with no help from the church. Most churches count keeping buildings authentic as more important than service. Yeah. Judge Wallace Hoggett called the children's abuse one of the most horrendous cases of child molestation he's ever presided over. In their lawsuit, Adams' children allege the Mormon Church implements the helpline net for the protection and spiritual counseling of sexual abuse victims, but for church attorneys to snuff out complaints and protect the Mormon Church from potentially costly lawsuits. Over 20 U.S. states have laws requiring clergy and medical professionals who work with children to report any reasonable belief of child sex abuse or neglect to police or the State Department of Child Safety. However, the laws contain loopholes allowing clergy to withhold info if the church determines it's quote-unquote reasonable and necessary to do so under church doctrine, the AP reported. The church said its helpline has everything to do with protecting children, nothing to do with covering up child sex abuse. Dear. Yeah, that law. Most Mormon clergy have little or no counseling or medical training. Yeah. So, apparently there are Christians targeting women who wear pants. Remember in the 1930s when wearing pants was like shocking? I don't, because I was born in 1985. So, the religious right has celebrated the overturn of Roe v. Wade, but their obsession with controlling women's bodies knows no satisfaction. Helpline sure calls our lawyers before it supports the story. Now, a far-right preacher known for his vile rants about the LGBTQ community is calling for men to burn their wives' pants because he says it's just a form of cross-dressing. Women wearing pants? Dear God. So So Brother Duncan Urbanek spread the love of God by using anti-gay slurs and encouraging men to destroy their spouse's possessions. Urbanek is a member of the Steadfast Baptist Church, one of the most vicious anti-LGBTQ hate groups in the nation. Church leaders have called for the execution of gay men and publicly celebrated tragedies that killed members of the LGBTQ community. People want to get so riled up. Yeah, F-slur are an abomination. God hates him. He begins. Well, didn't it just say if you're a cross-dresser, you're an abomination too? Now, obviously, it's not as bad as being an F-slur, he continued, but God is still very upset with your sin. Pants make you a dude, apparently. Yeah, apparently, and I know what should be done about this, knowing this as Christians. If you're a woman and you own any pants, throw them away, light them on fire. If you're a man and your wife has pants, throw them away. And if she yells at you, so be it, throw them away. That's a good fight to be in. If I was wearing a dress that was online, he said, as his strange rant continued, I would do everything in my power to get rid of that picture. Like, man, I gotta find the owner and persuade him. I gotta pay him off. Like, man, please delete that picture. Interesting rant. You know, there's no picture of me wearing a dress, he added quickly with a nervous chuckle. Why do I get this strange impression? There is a picture of this man with a dress. Because I'm never going to put one on. I don't own any, and I don't want to wear any, and women should have that same standard. There's no biblical injunction that's specifically about women in pants. At the time the Bible was written, trousers weren't a part of wardrobe, and men wore tunics and robes. Yeah. Now here's the shocking news. Joe Rogan advises listeners to vote Republican, cites Democrats' pandemic response errors. I know, it is a shock. Did you know Joe Rogan has come out as a Republican? Okay, I stole that last joke from Dusty Smith. But anyways, Joe Rogan unsurprisingly voices support for the Republican Party in the upcoming midterms during a recent episode of his podcast. Rogan, who pushed back against claims of being a secret conservative last month, pointed the finger at Democrats for their response to the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope there's lessons to be learned in this because this is a new thing, Rogan said. We had never had this before. No one that was alive today ever experienced a true pandemic. I'm hoping that now that this is over, people are going to recognize that some serious errors were made and not repeat those. Although... which means there are pictures of bro in dress or lingerie. Yeah, no, it's so sus. But yeah, he continues, as far as compensation for all these people that were forced to close their businesses and keep doors shuttered and lost everything they had worked for decades to build, no, they're just going to be angry. When guest Aaron Rodgers asked what particular group should do about it, Rogan responded, vote Republican. Well, the Republican Party was in power during the start of the pandemic and the lead up to the response of the pandemic. So, yeah. Yeah, so, Rogan basically has come out as a Republican. So, because there's not enough silly Christian right-wing Christians. Apparently, the right is attacking Christians for not being anti-gay enough, which is the most blasphemous attitude. So, like, if you're talking about the Christian Bible, which I am slightly aware of, I believe there's a parable of the Good Samaritan, and you can use some of the applicable part. Yes, dude, there are living people who remember 1917 Fly, where they yelled about face covering. The far Christian group 1 Million Moms has launched a new campaign, and the target is a little surprising, even for them. This time they're not upset with jewelry commercials or Sesame Street. The source of their ire is other Christians. Oh, flu cover. Yeah. Christianity is a quote-unquote serious threat, they warn, when practiced as described in the Bible and modeled by the religion's namesake. Parents need to be warned and informed about the continuous threat, and now we have a powerful source available to help parents with the serious problems, they warned followers. The group is an AstroTurf project of the anti-LGBTQ hate group American Family Association. Despite the name, the group has a single employee, Monica Cole, that is employed by the larger organization. Cole goes on to warn followers of the dangers of gay Christianity. Let's see if you've heard any of these statements before. Cole says in the blast, God made people gay, and therefore being gay should be celebrated and affirmed. Jesus never mentions homosexuality even once. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is about inhospitality and greed, not homosexuality. If the Bible were written today, it would be gay affirming. The Bible doesn't say anything about sexual orientation. Christians hate gay people and need to change their theology to be more loving. I mean, I agree with all those statements. If you've heard one or more of these statements before, whether on social media or in conversations with a family member or even promoted by a supposedly Christian pastor who just encountered one of the many influences of gay Christianity, she warns. But but all of this is true. Sodom and Gomorrah is about inhospitality and greed. The sin committed is the sin against hospitality. Hospitality is like a big thing in that part of the Bible, or that part of the Torah as well. Yeah, it's just the main person who spoke out against gay people was Paul, who is a dick. Oh, it's actually an advertisement for a book. Wow. So, Federal Disability Employment Program bans sub-minimum wage. A major federal program that facilitates jobs for people with disabilities working on government contracts will soon no longer allow them to be paid less than the minimum wage. The rule finalized this month with Ability One program will prohibit the payment of what's known as sub-minimum wage. Current law allows employers to obtain special 14C certificates from U.S. Department of Labor to pay disabled people less than the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, but increasingly, cities and states are barring the practice. A new rule, which takes effect on October 19th, will ban the use of 14C certificates to pay employees working on new Ability One contracts, as well as extensions or renewals, and when exercising options on existing contracts. However, nonprofit agencies working with Ability One are being given the option to request an extension of up to a year to come into compliance. 14C sucks. 14C is awful. Ending payment of subminimum wage is a major step forward for the Ability One program, said Jeffrey, chairperson of the Ability One Commission, an independent federal agency that administers the program. While payment of subminimum wages has been declining in the program for years, it's past time to ensure that all employees are fairly compensated for their work. Goodwill Inc. runs off of 14C. That doesn't surprise me. So they would probably be able to until October of next year, which will... my concern there is that it gives them time to fire all their disabled employees. With the change, people with disabilities employed through Ability One contracts will earn at least federal or state or local minimum wage. In some cases, they will be paid even more due to federal pay requirements for certain types of jobs. About 40,000 individuals who are blind or have significant disabilities are employed through Ability One at over 1,000 locations nationwide. The program directs federal contracts to network of some 450 nonprofit agencies, which provide nearly $4 billion in products and services to the government in fiscal year 2021 alone. Is Farpath's time commission to prohibit the payment of subminimum wages for employees' Ability One contracts said, however, the rule does not go far enough. The commission should have also precluded participating Ability One nonprofits from using 14C certificates anywhere in the workforce, not just Ability One contracts. Yes. This will this will stop a lot of problems, but won't stop all of them. Disability rights groups battle Lyft for wheelchair accessible vehicles again. Most ARC providers to sheltered workshops are not actual jobs. In 2018, Ansel Lurio found himself trapped in a snowstorm after leaving a dentist appointment in Westchester County, New York. Lurio usually rode home in his motorized wheelchair, but this time the snow made it impossible. He said the buses weren't running and there are no paratransit vans around, so he ordered a lift. If you look for accessible vehicles in Westchester, it tells you none are available. That day, he felt he had no other choice but to call an ambulance. Uber's website says it offers non-folding wheelchair accessible services in New York City, but not Westchester. The ambulance could only bring me to a hospital, not my home, he explained. I was stuck at the hospital overnight, having to explain that I wasn't sick, I just need an ambulance to get home. It was an awful night at the hospital. If I'd been able to get a lift ride home, none of this would have happened. I'm surprised the hospital didn't kick him out. I'm not sure they can in a snowstorm. Since that was like the main dealio. There are some hospital policies that make it difficult for them to do certain awful acts that they did a lot more of earlier. So Lyft does this in states with government regulations, including Boston, Chicago, Dallas, LA, New York, Philadelphia, Portland, Phoenix, San Francisco, and some surrounding areas. But disability rights groups want Lyft to make this accessibility nationwide. Lyft needs to provide wheelchair accessible services to everyone. To do that, all Lyft has to do is turn off the blocker or toggle that prevents people from identifying their vehicles as WAVs and prevents riders from requesting WAVs. Remove the toggle everywhere else, and you'll give a lot more WAV rides. I don't know what WAV is. Did I miss that? Whatever. Lyft has been embroiled in the class action lawsuit for a while. Lyft says that there's an extremely limited supply of these specially manufactured vehicles across the country, and even fewer among the population of ride-share drivers. Despite these obstacles, we're constantly working to improve blah blah. General corporate stuff. Wheelchair accessible vehicle. Okay. That makes sense. So, I might have to go quickly because I just looked at how the time and realized I didn't have much left. Answer is not medically assisted suicide. Disabled people demand full civil human rights. So, 38 years ago, accident left paralyzed without. This person paralyzed below his shoulders. Father was broken heart and wished I had died instead. His hopelessness about my life, however painful for me, was but a simple reflection of widespread prejudice against disabled people. A few years after my injury, Jack Kevorkian became a sort of folk hero for helping terminally ill people die through his quote-unquote self-deliverance machine. It later came out that more than 2/3 of his clients were not terminal at all, but disabled people, primarily women in psychological distress. Most physicians view our quality of life as worse. Disabled advocates have raised concerns about the fate of disabled people, like Oregonian Sarah McSweeney and Texan Michael Hickson. Both wanted to live. Both were loved by family and caregivers, but they died after hospital personnel denied them treatment based on their disabilities. There's a small number of available vehicles, but not allowing requests makes everything worse. Yes. Over the last 25 years, first Oregon, then additional states, and Washington, D.C. established assisted suicide programs for people expected to die within 6 months. Proponent rhetoric has focused on compassion for people's physical pain and suffering and the hope of a choiceful, peaceful end. The reality, as shown by the top 5 reported end-of-life concerns in Oregon, hinge not on pain, but on people's existential distress, as one study termed it, in reaction to disabling features of their illness, depending on and feeling like a burden on other people, losing abilities or losing the respect of self and others, loss of dignity, and shame over incontinence. Prominent bioethicist Thaddeus Pope concedes that everybody who's using medical aid in dying is disabled. And probably you could go to the next step and say the reason they want medical aid in dying is because of their disability. To Pope, any disability a patient finds personally intolerable is sufficient reason to assist in their suicide, i.e., let's shame people for being disabled and then make it easier for them to die. Definitely not eugenics. What? Disability rights advocates appreciate the willingness of many legislators to take our concerns seriously. We worry with death reframed as a benefit for disabled people that increased legislation will bring expansion of eligibility. Yeah. Indigenous Judge Obansawan, sorry if I slurred the name. Anyways, nominated to Canada's top court. Michael Obansawan has been nominated to Supreme Court of Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced in a move that would make the experienced judge the first Indigenous person to sit on the nation's top court. The accomplished jurist, her nomination is a result of open, nonpartisan selection process. I'm confident that Justice Obansawan will bring invaluable knowledge and contributions to our country's highest court. Yeah, so good for Canada. Unfortunately, I tend to be more the problem is the passage of Bill C-7, which expanded the medical aid in dying to people whose natural deaths are not reasonably foreseeable, i.e., and also expands it to neurodivergent people. So if I'm having a mental health crisis, I can ask for assisted suicide, and they'll think it's a good idea. Yeah, this goes through a list of problems with Canada's euthanasia aspect. Worth checking out. This article is part of notdeadyet.org. So if you want to, it's like probably the most recent article or the second most recent article at the time of the filming of this. It's one of the most recent articles. There aren't a lot of articles, so it's easy to find, but this gives a lot of information on this because there are a lot of problems with the medical aid in dying. Let's conflate bodily autonomy with independence and social value some more. Yeah. In Australia Deputy Prime Minister scraps ridiculous ban on quote-unquote woke LGBTQ morning teas. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Defense Richard Marles on Tuesday scrapped the ban that meant woke events, quote-unquote woke events, including LGBTQ plus morning teas, should not be scheduled by ADF employees. Former Defense Minister turned opposition leader Peter Dutton had brought in the ban in May 2021 after employees celebrated the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Intersexphobia, and Transphobia by wearing rainbow clothing and having a tea party. Dutton said that the ADF should not be putting effort into matters that distract from their primary mission to protect Australia's national security. Nobody's going after Australia. To meet these important aims, changing language protocols and those events, such as morning teas where personnel are encouraged to wear particular clothes in celebration, are not required and should cease. But after being appointed the Minister of Defense on the 1st of June following the Australian federal election, Marles has attempted to repeal much of the attack on what Dutton describes as the woke agenda. Yeah, it's some people are awful. So this is one of my problems with Pink News. It's a UK source and uses the term thugs, which has a much more racial connotation in the United States, I believe. Anyway, violent homophobic people held Ghanaian LGBTQ plus activists hostage, annoy us and will kill you. So, Rightify Ghana, one of the West African nation's most vocal LGBTQ plus groups, claimed its executive director was ambushed on the 20th of August in the Ashanti region. He had been investigating an alleged case of abuse against a queer person at around 11:20 a.m. that turned out to be a quote-unquote trap organized by a notorious violent and organized anti-gay group. Rightify Ghana tweeted on Saturday, "If you annoy us, we kill you and bury you here and no one would know," one of the men told the director at knife point. The men knew that he was an LGBTQ plus activist and aggressively interrogated him. While Rightify Ghana did not mention the name of the group, it said its members revealed how they carry out a highly organized campaign of violence against LGBTQ plus Ghanaians. Ghanaians. Whatever. The primary target, the director was told, that is the LGBTQ plus community and the general public. They also shared how other groups target queer men in alleged murder for money ritual. Rightly Ghana added. The group is now working with the Ghana Police Service. If the men are arrested and charged, it could represent a turning point in the handling of crimes against LGBTQ plus people in Ghana, considering the force's history of arbitrarily arresting LGBTQ plus people. Ghana has a disturbing history of brutality against LGBTQ plus people. Yeah. Apparently, anti-LGBTQ plus groups are increasingly empowered by politicians stirring hate. In 2021, lawmakers introduced a bill that punished displays of same-sex affection and advocacy of LGBTQ plus rights with up to a decade in prison. So, Hong Kong court rejects crucial bid to have overseas same-sex marriage recognized. A legal bid by LGBTQ plus activist Jimmy Sham to have overseas same-sex marriages recognized in Hong Kong has been rejected in court. Sham married his partner in New York in 2013 and has been fighting to have his marriage recognized in Hong Kong for almost 5 years. On Wednesday, the region's Court of Appeal stated Hong Kong only acknowledges heterosexual unions. Judgment read that marriage was defined as a voluntary union for life of one man and one woman to the exclusion of all others. Sham's lawyer Hector Pun had argued the exclusion of same-sex marriage was a violation of people's right to equality and cited Article 37 of the Basic Law that stipulates the freedom of marriage of Hong Kong residents and their right to raise a family freely shall be protected by law. However, the court dismissed this argument in their judgment. Sham hasn't said yet whether or not he'll appeal, which is a shame. So, trans man on his honeymoon dies under suspicious circumstances. A trans man traveling his honeymoon in Indonesia was arrested and died under suspicious circumstances earlier this month, according to family. According to Harvard Crimson, Fantasia from Peru was a master's candidate at the Harvard County School of Government and was founding member of the Peruvian trans rights advocacy organization, Diversidad Transmasculinas. Wow, that was real slaughtering. I'm sorry. In a statement released on Tuesday, the families of Fantasia and his spouse, Sebastian Marlano, alleged Fantasia was arrested in an act of racial discrimination and transphobia, deprived of basic rights, and subjected to police violence, while his family and lawyers were denied access and information about his condition. So Bali police told Indonesian news outlets Bali Radar that 3 days into his detention, Fantasia consumed unseized drugs. Police said he was taken to Bayangkara Hospital after experiencing stomach pain and vomiting. When his condition deteriorated, he was transported to Sangla Central General Hospital, where he died on August 11th. The cause of death is complete failure of body function that causes impaired kidney function, impaired liver, and nervous system function to the patient's brain. Indonesian police obstructed access to the hospital at all times to the lawyers hired by the family, as well as the Harvard students who came to their aid. The family wrote, "We do not know the real causes of his death because the Indonesian authorities have not allowed an independent autopsy." On Wednesday, the Peruvian foreign minister defended its actions. Consular section of the Peruvian embassy in Indonesia has been providing consular assistance and following up on the case within the framework of its competencies and with respect for local laws, while maintaining uninterrupted communications with their families. A lawyer for the couple's families responded, demanding a process that determines those responsible for the torture, extortion, and violation of human rights that led to the death of Rodrigo. Oh, they're also trying to extort the people for like $200,000. Afro-Italians shaking up Italy's rigid notions of national identity. So after moving to Italy from Senegal at 4 years old, Aida Bangu struggled to be accepted both for her hijab and her skin color. She was excluded by classmates and belittled by teachers. So African Italians are frequently cast as outsiders in Italian society, even though their history goes back decades. The country had been experiencing waves of arrivals from Africa long before the refugee crisis. Yet, according to sociologist Mauro Valeri, this is a history that still needs to be written in a lecture for New York University Florence, or for NYU Florence. I don't know if it's New York University, it could be something else. Anyways, Valeri presents notable Black Italians that have fallen into obscurity after 1930s fascism redefined Italians as Aryan and Catholic. But as geographies would have it, Italy has been among the European countries bearing the brunt of refugees and migrant arrivals over the past few years, and the political narrative surrounding the refugee crisis has deepened the struggle for acceptance for Afro-Italians. Matteo Salvini, the leader of the right-wing League Party and former deputy prime minister, is notorious for advocating hard-line anti-immigration policies. But yeah, I think it's these cultural cultures change, and I don't think people should be excluded by culture because of where they happen to be born. So, more importantly, sorry, I saw it was a bit long, and I am running low on the times. Trans woman in Japan denied parental rights to her own child. Country Supreme Court denied her legal rights to her own biological daughter who was born after she transitioned. A trans woman in Japan was denied legal rights to her own daughter after an appeal to the nation's highest courts. According to Japan Times, the unidentified couple, a cisgender woman and a trans woman, conceived their second daughter with sperm preserved before the trans partner's medical transition. While the Japanese law recognizes the trans woman's parental rights to her first child born before transition, the country's Supreme Court held that does not recognize her rights to the second born after transition. No further details were immediately available. Gender transition has legally been accepted in the island nation since 2004, but the law imposes strict requirements to change gender marker, including psychiatric evaluation and removal of sex organs, including sterilization. According to reports, the trans partner was legally permitted to change her gender on her family register 4 years ago. In February, a lower court ruled there is currently nothing in Japanese law to recognize her parental rights. Friday's High Court ruling confirmed the lower court's judgment. The trans woman's partner, as birth mother, retains parental rights to both the couple's daughters. Japan has no laws on the books to prevent discrimination against LGBTQ plus people, despite voting repeatedly for United Nations Human Rights Council resolutions calling for an end to anti-LGBTQ discrimination and violence. It's also the only G7 nation, a group that includes US, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and the UK, to bar same-sex marriage. After one court ruled in 2021 the same-sex ban was unconstitutional, raising hopes for LGBTQ plus community in Japan, another court overruled the decision in June. Yeah, Japan sucks. For some stuff. Thousands take to streets in Serbia to protest LGBTQ rights as president tries to cancel Europride. On Sunday in Belgrade, a massive rally took over the Serbian capital protesting a pan-European pride event that had already been canceled. The march was led by the Serbian Orthodox Church and joined by a collection of right-wing hate groups and pro-Russian nationalists. Bishops warned the event was a threat to traditional family values. Protesters displayed crosses and other religious iconography while carrying anti-LGBTQ signs declaring, "Save our children." The day before, the president of Serbia announced plans to cancel a long-planned Europride in the city, using the excuse that there's just too much going on. There's just too much going on. Why have a pride event? Because there's just too much going on in the world. Anyway, Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić claimed the country is facing too many problems to handle the event. The Euro Pride celebration was to take place in September 12th to 18th. While conceding the cancellation would be a violation of minority rights, Vučić said, at this moment, the state is pressured by numerous problems, citing economic woes, tensions with neighboring Kosovo, and threats from far-right extremists. Organizers weren't buying it. President Vucic cannot cancel someone else's event, said the president of the European Pride Organizers Association. The right to hold Pride has been ruled by the European Court of Human Rights to be a fundamental human right. Yeah, it's... the only thing that can happen is for the police to ban the march. Militic had said. However, such a hypothetical decision would be contrary to the Constitution. It's just Pride to be postponed for happier times. Pride's not about happier times. Singapore plans to decriminalize sex between men, says Prime Minister. Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien has announced that his country will decriminalize sex between men, but will continue to uphold the legal definition of marriage as being between a man and a woman. In his annual National Day rally speech, Lee said on Sunday that he believed repealing Section 377A of the Penal Code, a colonial-era law that criminalizes sex between men, is the right thing to do, as most Singaporeans were becoming more accepting of gay people. Private sexual behavior between consenting adults does not raise any law and order issue. There's no justification to persecute people for it, nor to make it a crime, Lee said. This will bring the law into line with current social mores, and I hope to provide some relief to gay Singaporeans. It was unclear when exactly Section 377A would be revoked. Lee pledged to repeal. The repeal will be limited and will not shake Singapore's traditional family and societal norms, including how marriage is defined, what children are taught in schools, what's shown on television, and general public conduct. He said the government will amend the Constitution to ensure there can be no constitutional challenge to allow it. He said the government will amend the Constitution to ensure that there can be no constitutional challenge to allow same-sex marriage. Even as we repeal Section 377A, we will uphold and safeguard the institution of marriage, Lee said. We have to amend the Constitution to protect it, and we will do so. Since 2007, the Singaporean Parliament last debated whether to repeal Section 377A, its position was to keep the law but not enforce it. But gay men says the law hangs over their heads and discriminates against them. So this will be a minor change that might make things better. Vietnam says being gay is not a disease in stunning victory for LGBTQ rights. Vietnam Health Ministry has declared that being LGBTQ+ is not an illness. The nation's Ministry of Health said in an official document released August that being LGBTQ+ is not an illness and cannot be cured, nor needs to be cured, and cannot be converted in any way. It urged medical professionals to treat LGBTQ+ people with respect. The health ministry also strongly condemned the pseudoscientific and traumatizing practice of conversion therapy. The directive told medical professionals not to interfere nor force treatment upon these groups. If any support is needed, the health ministry advised it to be in the form of psychological assistance and performed only by those who have knowledge of sexual identity. Vietnam's new directive comes after tireless advocacy by LGBTQ plus rights activists in the Southeast Asian nation. Words. I'm bad at pronouncing names, and I'm tired of messing that up. The LGBTQI rights program manager at the Institute of Studies for Society, Economy, and Environment told Al Jazeera that seeing the announcement was like a dream. Something we never thought would happen, let alone coming from the most trusted source for medical information in Vietnam. I think the impact on queer youth will be very, very evident. And it was a critical step as it affirms that being LGBTQ plus is not something you can fix. When a queer child gets taken to a medical facility, if they know about this, it can be used to defend themselves. Yeah, no, this is just... I mean, more places need to do this, but yeah, this is just good. Anti-trans groups hijacking Pride in Simru, drowned out by United LGBTQ plus community. Anti-trans demonstrators were all but drowned out by shouts of solidarity from LGBTQ plus community celebrating Pride Simru. On Saturday, the streets of Cardiff heaved with rainbow flags, handmade signs, and tossed confetti for the largest LGBTQ plus event in Wales. But members of lesbian separatist group Get the L Out UK gatecrashed the march, holding banners reading "Lesbian, not queer," and "Trans activism erases lesbians," and "Lesbians don't like penises." Mobile phone footage shows South Wales police asking the around dozen counter-protesters to move to the side to let Pride goers continue marching along the Mary Street. The group, police said, were trying to block Pride Simru to put it to grinding halt. All officers said their presence was causing confrontations between them and Pride goers, with a clip showing participants shouting "F off" to a member of the Get the L Out UK. Turfs disrespecting Pride again. Yeah. That pretty much sums it up. So predictably, many anti-trans people and groups characterize the incident as damning indictment of how those opposing trans rights are mistreated. The police failed to protect us today, they tweeted. But South Wales police stressed in a statement that officers were simply telling the group to move along, nothing more, nothing less. During the event, officers were required to engage with a small protest group who had assembled themselves en route to block the procession. The agency said, to ensure no further disruption to the event, officers asked the group to move to an alternative location nearby, which they agreed to. Officers explained why they needed to move, provide guidance about protecting lawfully, and offered to facilitate lawful protest. The group cooperated and left the area shortly after, contrary to some social media reports, and he was arrested or forcibly moved by officers.
Up yours, woke moralists. We'll see who cancels who.
Yeah, basically, that's what the turfs are doing. This is after all the principle. Yeah. And finally, no, oops, clicked the wrong thing. So, LGB Alliance Ireland labeled far-right hate group and new extremism report. LGB Alliance Ireland has been named by far-right hate and has been named a far-right hate and extremist group by a monitoring group. The report released on Sunday by the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism listed LGB Alliance Ireland with 11 other groups embracing beliefs and activities that demean, harass, and inspire violence against people based on their identity traits. LGB Alliance Ireland is an offshoot of the UK pressure group, and like it claims that trans rights are in conflict with LGBT rights while devoting the vast majority of its efforts attacking the advancement of trans rights. The GPAHE, formed by two former members of the prestigious U.S. Southern Poverty Law Center, notes that Irish LGBTQ plus activists contend that LGB Alliance Ireland's membership is mostly UK-based, though the Irish chapter insists all our committee members are living in Ireland. It dedicates much of its report to the UK group, which has, among other things, campaigned against life-saving gender recognition reforms, gender-affirming healthcare for young people, and letting trans people use single-sex spaces and services. GPAAG noted the UK's LGB Alliance has claimed adding the plus to LGB gives the green light to paraphilias like bestiality, and that one of its founders claimed lesbians are facing extinction because students are being taught about trans issues in schools. Similarly, LGBT Alliance Ireland has rallied against legal protections for trans people, gender-neutral bathroom policies, and said healthcare for trans youth means butch lesbians no longer exist. Trans Activism UK, a grassroots protest group welcomed GPAHE's findings. There have been years of mounting evidence now that the LGBT Alliance only represents a fringe minority of anti-trans extremists. Researchers made the list examining media reports, government documents, and social media to see how Irish groups stoke violence towards certain demographics of people. And if they threaten democracy, according to the FAQ, LGB Alliance Ireland fell onto GPAHE's radar after its UK counterpart compared LGBTQ plus inclusion to bestiality, said co-founder Heidi Bayer. We include LGBT Alliance Ireland due to their vicious attacks on the trans community. She told Pink News their work advocating against trans rights was also a serious concern. We believe in human and civil rights protections for all people. Organization lobby efforts to cement trans people's exclusion from conversion therapy bans was cause for concern, she added. As well as LGBT Alliance Ireland, the report named 4 groups as white nationalists, including the Nationalists, the National Party. It also listed groups it deemed anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic, anti-LGBTQ+, anti-woman, and conspiracy theorists. The Global Project Against Hate and Extremism said that most hate groups in Ireland espouse some form of white supremacist ideology, seek to spread conspiracy theories, and whip up hatred towards immigrants. 8 of the 12 groups were labeled as anti-LGBTQ+, including the Iona Institute, the ironically named Irish Council for Human Rights, and Seed of Ireland. Other groups listed included official Proud Boys Ireland, the Irish counterpart to the American all-male nationalist group behind the Capitol riots, and the disparate anti-lockdown Yellow Vest Ireland movement. The report said rise in LGBTQ+ equality in Ireland added fuel to what was already an upward trend of far-right rhetoric worldwide. Transphobia has become the go-to bigotry of choice for many far-right groups, and for a very simple reason. The trans community has been the next target for far-right movements, especially social conservatives, as attacks on the lesbian and gay men become less effective, and as more people accepted that community as equals. These movements have a long history of targeting sexual minorities as deviant and unwholesome. Common threads among many Irish hate groups include imported conspiracy theories about cultural Marxism and Agenda 21. A majority of the groups are found to have embraced the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, a racist belief that racial diversity spells the end of majority white Christian countries, women not having enough children, or white women not having enough children. Jewish people and globalists are to blame for all this, believers say. Surge in far-right activity began in earnest following the legalization of marriage equality. Pink News has contacted LGB Alliance and LGB Alliance Ireland for comment. No doubt that they will not likely reply. That being said, you don't have to date someone or their group to recognize their humanity. Yeah. So, that being said, that's the end to this news. I'm going to play the ending, and then I will be setting things up for League of Legends.
Sex and race, because they are easy, visible differences, have been the primary ways of organizing human beings into superior and inferior groups, and into the cheap labor on which this system still depends.
No, you all tell me to go and hide my tail between my legs. I have been beaten. I have had my nose broken. I have been thrown in jail. I have lost my job. I have lost my apartment for gay liberation. And you all treat me this way? What the fuck's wrong with you all?
We want no more segregation. We will accept no more discussion of segregation. And I would appreciate it if you would stop shaking your head in agreement when I don't think you understand what we are talking about.
Freedom is merely privilege extended unless enjoyed by one and all.
All we are doing with this bill is allowing two people who love each other to have that love recognised by way of marriage. That is all we are doing.
I speak not for myself, but for those without voice can be heard. Those who have fought for their rights. Their right to live in peace.
Sometimes, especially in this body, I feel as though if Christ himself walked through these doors and said what he said thousands of years ago, he would be maligned as a radical and rejected from these doors.